Good evening. Welcome to Public Exposure. Stan Emmert is off this week. I'm John Arthur Wilson, in place for Stan. Tonight we're going to cover a wide range of local issues, and that with somebody who knows it oh so well from years of growing up here, a Northwest native. You don't find many of those around here anymore. But one of the things you got to ask yourself about is, where did he get that name that he uses to publish under Mossback? Mossback. Now, Mossback, it's a column that's running crosscut online, but what is a Mossback? Why is there a Mossback? And who's Mossback? Well, we'll answer who's Mossback right now with my guest and my dear friend, Skip Berger. Skip, welcome.
John, thank you for having me.
Let's start tonight and talk a little bit about the summer has wrapped up, but the mayor tried to wrap it up with a block party. It was kind of a bust, wasn't it?
Well, you know, the mayor of Seattle had the great idea to shut down various streets around town to make so that Seattle could enjoy carless days in Alki and Capitol Hill and the Rainier Valley. And the whole idea is, you know, making the city more pedestrian friendly and getting people. The mayor's office had a plan to try and get people to give their car the summer off, was the slogan.
Yeah, apparently at the end of a pickup truck.
Well, yeah, exactly. The first party they gave was kind of a washout. It rained and very few people showed up. It was in a residential neighborhood on Capitol Hill. And it was all the preparation work was done at the last minute, and a lot of people didn't realize they were supposed to remove their parked cars from in front of their houses and even some of the side streets. So the tow trucks came through and hauled off 20 plus cars, and they ticketed a bunch of cars, and you know, people were out of town on vacation and things. Created a huge hubbub.
How does something like that happen?
Well, you know, I think when an idea sort of outruns the execution. I mean, granted, it was the first attempt to do this. I think there's sometimes a sense that everybody in Seattle sort of agrees on something, and everybody, you know, we all think it's a good idea, but
that's the Seattle way.
Exactly, you know. And oh yeah, you know, saving the environment's a great idea, but they sort of forget on the communication follow-through that a lot of people aren't paying attention. A lot of people aren't following these kinds of things in great detail. They learned from some of their mistakes when they did the next one in the Rainier Valley, and apparently nobody was towed, and they called like every house in the neighborhood and said your street's going to be closed. But there just seems to be a mentality which I think is, you know, really irritating a lot of people in Seattle, that the details of their lives are kind of worth meddling with, but people don't really think about the other considerations.
Do you think part of the phenomenon we're seeing, I get a sense from some folks that they feel like, look, I'm as much for the environment as the mayor or, you know, Councilman Conlon or whoever else, but you're all making this a lot harder than it seems to need to be. I mean, you're closing streets down and towing my car. The recycling program's reached a point where you have to have a doctorate in separation. And you've got a situation where now we've got the great plastic bag revolt.
That's right. Well, you just I mean, separation anxiety, it takes on a whole new meaning, I guess. And you'll be fined if you don't get your garbage sorted correctly. I think, you know, this summer there were a couple of things that came up. One was the statement that we shouldn't have beach bonfires, you know, that somehow in that, you know, what did we get, 3 weeks of summer this year, building a bonfire at Alki Beach, you know, was going to destroy the environment. You've got the bag tax, which, you know, has a lot of people think it's a great idea, but a lot of people say, well, you know, charging me 20 cents for a grocery bag, you know, that's a lot of money, and it's a pain in the butt. And people don't feel like they were, you know, really consulted on that. That was sort of a top-down idea. And
I want to take us back now in the Wayback Machine to 4 years ago. If we could have the slide about the governor's race. Skip, you wrote about that, about picking our next chief executive, and you said Rossi seemed to be all charm and no substance, and Gregoire was all substance and no charm. Maybe with a little genetic engineering here, we might have a governor we can love. How much has changed? This governor's race is looking like it's going to be another nail biter.
Yeah, well, absolutely nothing's changed, which I think is kind of a shock because I think there was a sense in 2004 that Washington was going to be carried by John Kerry. It's a fairly democratic state. Gregoire was running, had a lot of support from women and other people who, we'd like to have governors who are sort of symbolic of our progressiveness. And I think that there was an expectation. So when the election in 2004 became this kind of nail biter, and I mean, some people still think it was stolen.
I saw some of those guys in eastern Washington
Right.
last week.
Yeah, there's some parts of the state will never be convinced otherwise. Nevertheless, she won by under 200 votes, and I think there was a sense that she had run a fairly poor campaign, that Rossi had been able to kind of remain undefined as this kind of, nice guy, and that if people...
But have they really defined him this time?
Well, no, that's the interesting thing. You would have thought that this time out they would have learned the lesson. They would have gone out and defined Rossi before he could, kind of get the nice guy mode. They could bring up the issues in which he's, is very conservative and much more conservative than the state generally. And they haven't really been able to do that this time. The polls are showing, at best, neck and neck for Gregoire, and some of the more recent polls have showed her, actually behind. And I think part of the problem with her is there is the charm and substance problem. Part of it is there seems to be a real chronic problem with her communication effort. She hasn't been able to keep a speechwriter and communication director's kind of revolving door. Doesn't seem to be able to tell the story of her campaign. And campaigns are largely about stories. They're largely about narratives. Whether you're John McCain or Barack Obama, having a narrative that you can tell is very important. And the other thing is, people generally don't like Olympia. People don't like state government particularly. And the fact that she happens to be very good at the nuts and bolts of state government, it's sort of like her strength is her weakness. She's actually very effective, but people don't give her credit for it because they don't really trust Olympia anyway.
But for years, that didn't seem to matter. I mean, people not liking Olympia isn't this just in. It's nothing new. For a long time, people have said, oh, it's all Olympia. But it seemed like they were always willing to cut the incumbent governor some slack. She doesn't seem to get any slack.
Yeah, and I think, again, I do think part of that's communication. I've seen her in situations. She spoke at the Evergreen State College commencement a while ago, and I was, I was stunned. She talked about globalization to Evergreen. I mean, she could have talked about feminism, anything, but globalization did not go over well.
Absolutely. Skip, we'll be right back. You're watching Public Exposure. I'm John Wilson, in for Stan Emmert, and we're talking to Skip Berger from Crosscut, the website that's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a wonderful place to get a daily dose of what's going on here in Seattle.